I was being abused by ugly people, and I ended up leaving my body, which is what caused me to lose consciousness and to slip underwater in the pool that I was swimming. It happened late at night. I was also by myself when it happened, and that's where I first met my first, I'll just call him a being of light. I wasn't panicked. Like, I should have been afraid, but I wasn't afraid. And I know now that's because I knew where I had been. I wanted to stay because the other side is so incredibly lovely and beautiful and loving, and you don't want to come back. And that's the honest truth. And the whole idea, the whole reason for everything, it's to return home to the thing that created us, that infinite light that we're all cut from. We're all cut from that same energy.
So, Thayne, when did your near death experience happen and what led to that moment?
My near-death experience. Well, my first one happened when I was a child. I was being abused by ugly people, and they had given me some medication that was supposed to drug me and knock me out, but they gave me too much, and I ended up leaving my body. And the first time that I had a near-death experience, it was at the hands of abusers. And I found myself literally leaving my body and then going to the corner of the room. And that's where I first met my first, I'll just call him a being of light. That's exactly what it was for me. And it was interesting because, Alex, it wasn't like, it was a light being, and it was energy, and you could see through these people because there was more than one person there. But so they were like physical, but not physical is the best way to describe it. Like, you could make your way, you understood that they were loosely organized to represent something that appeared to be a human form, but not like solid, tangible like we are used to. So that energy happened to be my grandfather, and he had passed away a couple years prior to. So in this particular instance, that was my first experience. And my grandfather made it very aware to me that I couldn't stay, and that I had many things in my life that I had to complete and do. And so I wanted to stay because the other side is so incredibly lovely and beautiful and loving, and you don't want to come back. And that's the honest truth. So it's hard because I remember pleading with my grandfather that I didn't want to come back, and I'd rather stay with him and everything else on that side. And he was very adamant, no, that can't happen. So he ultimately pushed me back into my body. And then I woke up in that bathtub slash ice chest, if that's what you want to call it. And then I was revived. So that was the first time that I had a near-death experience. So, I want to back up just a little bit because we went straight to the NDE, which is fine. The challenge is that my backstory is kind of what led up to everything that happened in my life. And I think that it's important for people to understand that probably the most beautiful thing of all that I learned from my NDE is that everything that happened or happens to us while we're here is nothing more than course correction and learning. We're never being punished. We are constantly being honed to become a better person, because life is about the expansion of the soul and about the expansion and the evolution of mankind and love in this incredible, amazing thing that we call life. And that's what it's about. So for me, my challenges began as a kid because I lived on a street where there was a pedophile that moved into my neighborhood, and I had sold a bottle of honey to the woman, and I had simply just knocked on the door one day, and he invited me in to get the money, and then when I went into the back room to get the money, the door shut, and then he violated me and robbed me of what would have been a normal life and a normal development. So sadly, you know, pedophile abusers are really good at scaring children, and he certainly did a great job scaring me. So I did like what most people do. They clam up because my abusers used my little sister and then my family as leverage to keep me quiet. And I never wanted anything ugly to happen to my little sister because I was raised in the Mormon church. And sadly, I knew that they would carry through. And well, I take that back. They manipulated me to believe that they would carry it through. But ultimately, they weren't interested in abusing little girls. They only abused mostly little boys. And sadly, it went on for about 6 years of my life, and it got worse because there was a person that lived across the street from me, and then there was a man that lived behind me off the alley. Well, he was the janitor of the church where I went. So as a child, I should have been able to go to church and not worry about being abused by a pedophile, but sadly that wasn't my reality, and I was routinely abused by both leaders and members of the same church as a child. So sadly, my brain did what it was designed to do, Alex, in that it protected me. My brain began splitting as a little boy because of what was happening, and I developed something called dissociative identity disorder. It used to be called multiple personality syndrome, and it's a coping mechanism that develops in children at a young age that are repeatedly abused and generally in a severe way. So it impacts about 1% of the US population that has dissociative identity disorder. And sadly, people with DID are also portrayed in the media completely inaccurate. And then on top of that, we've got a bunch of influencers that are running around creating not necessarily accurate depictions of how people with DID actually live. Because every time there's a serial killer movie, the serial killer always has DID. And it's really sad because that's not the case. And does that happen? Sure. But the majority of people that have dissociative identity disorder are just kind people like me that happen to have been abused as a kid. And I developed multiple personalities as a coping mechanism. So my brain did everything that it was supposed to do, but having DID, which also led to severe depression, bipolar 1, ADHD, and then I also had complex PTSD. All right, so I tried to do what everybody else does. I tried to outrun my trauma. That's not something I recommend because eventually it's going to come back. And that's what it did to me in my 30s. I started having nightmares and I didn't know why. And then as I started leaning into that, I started understanding that there was a past that I had, but I didn't know how to access that past because my brain had eliminated it from me being able to recall it. So most of my adult life, I couldn't tell you what happened to me as a child because I had virtually little to no memory of that childhood. So, despite all of my effort, despite trying to stand back up, ultimately, it was a suicide attempt while traveling for business that was the wake up call that sent me home to my spouse. And ultimately, to start meeting with therapists to try and help me figure out what had happened to me and try and help me climb back out of this severe hole of depression and really, really challenging mental health. Because you can imagine when you have DID, I was also married to a woman with children, but I also identified as more than one personality, and not everybody was the same age or the same orientation. would made things very difficult for me. So most of my life has been chaos, but yet out of all of that madness, somehow I also managed to do okay. I did well in the business community despite the conditions that I had. I was really good at masking my behavior. And ultimately, that's also what led to my decision in my late 30s, early 40s to end my life because I wasn't authentic. The person that everybody saw on the outside that was successful was not the same person on the inside that felt like, the person in the Wizard of Oz just pulling the strings to make the puppet go. So that's ultimately what led to that first decision. That led to a life of healing. But what I will tell you is that traditional therapy 100% saved me because I wouldn't be alive had I not gone and worked with my first trauma therapist that used a technique called EMDR to help me uncover my memories and what exactly had happened to me. So from there, I ended up working with psychologists and a couple psychiatrists and was ultimately diagnosed late in life with these peculiar conditions. And then also told by the same medical community that I would probably have them the rest of my life. And most people in the professional community did not want to work with me because they don't have experience with adult male that have been abused as a kid. So it the amount of resources for men is disgusting. And that's also one of the reasons why I stand up and I started my company is to help people, particularly men that are abused as children, because the damage that's done to us as kids resurrects throughout our entire lives, but yet nobody steps up to help men. And that was certainly my case. So I tried to do what everybody else did. The doctors gave me a large amount of medication. That is the traditional route to heal mental health is to give you pills. So I know that the doctors had a good intention, but the reality was that I found myself with seven pill boxes to wake me up, wake me down, get me through my day. And it was all by prescription medication. And I was strung out. They should have never have given me that much medication, but that's what the community does. Instead of fixing the root source of the depression, the root source of the trauma, we just mask the symptoms. Well, that doesn't heal anybody. It just makes things worse. So I realized that my life wasn't working and I had been given some medication that ultimately is what led to the last near-death experience that I had where I drowned in my swimming pool. So specifically what happened was I was given a prescription that I should never have been given because I had a severe allergic reaction to that, which is what caused me to lose consciousness and to slip underwater in the pool that I was swimming. It happened late at night. I was also by myself when it happened. And 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 the other weird thing is, Alex, is like when it happened, I didn't have an immediate recall of what had happened. I remember swimming. I remember being on a raft in the pool, and then I remember waking up at the bottom of the pool. That's literally how it happened for me. And when I woke up, it's like literally my eyes woke up and I'm underneath the water and I could see the moon and I could see the surface of the stars, but I knew that I was wet and I knew that I couldn't breathe. And but here's the weird thing. I wasn't panicked. Like I should have been afraid, but I wasn't afraid. And I know now that's because I knew where I had been. I didn't know that in the immediate moment, but in some strange way, I knew that I had been to this place before. I had probably been there and I didn't recall it, but I'm now at the bottom of the pool and I got to get out. So I realized that if I didn't get out of the water, this was the end for me. And so I ultimately started pleading with God. And you have to understand it at the time, I would say I was more agnostic than anything. I left Christianity and Mormonism being an offshoot of Christianity. And then I became an atheist. I believed nothing. And then I had moved kind of towards being an agnostic. In other words, knowing that there was something greater out here that organized everything, but not being in a headspace to define it, call it God, call it Jesus, call it whatever. I just, I had already been burned by religion and abused by people in religion. So why would I go back to that? Made no sense to me. So I tried to do like what everybody else did. In other words, I looked at multiple religions. I looked at a lot of things and trying to figure out what had happened. And then here's the thing. When I went into the water, I went in the water with 10 personalities. When I came out of the water, I only had one personality, and all 10 of them were no longer there. That's the best way I can describe it because now when I got out, I could see that in my mind were kind of like the memories of people that I did not know that lived inside of my brain. Because in my DID system, my alters were not co-conscious, meaning that they did not know about the others, which is what made it particularly challenging because throughout my life, I would switch, say in the middle of a day or the middle of an evening, switch into another personality, and then I would go someplace. I would be somebody else, talk with different people. I might even end up sleeping in another place that I don't know how I got there. And then I woke up the next morning and I have no idea where I'm at or how I got there. That's the reality of people that struggle with some of these conditions. So I knew that the DID was different. I knew that. And I also knew that I had been someplace and it took me roughly 2 years, Alex, for me to be able to recall everything that happened to me when I was in the pool, specifically in the amount of time that I went under the water, lost consciousness. All I can say is a very large block of information was put inside my head. And what's weird about that, Alex, is I have a bachelor's degree in finance and real estate. I'm an entrepreneur. I've done well in the business community, but I'm not a doctor. I'm not a neuroscientist, although I consider myself one today because I've spent the last 2 years studying neuroscience and studying things like neuromodulators because something happened to me and I wanted to know more. So when I came back and I began kind of trying to assimilate back into life, there were many things that were different for me. Specifically like weird things. So like the first week after that NDE, I began being fascinated with the cosmos and the molecules and little tiny things that don't make any sense. Like, why am I interested in an atom and what it's composed of? And why do I care about how the water is going down the drain? Because that's exactly what I would do. I'd walk up to a drain and I'd turn the water on and I'd watch the water go down the drain. I'd add color. I mean, I became fascinated with like fluid dynamics, thermodynamics, heat, cold. I mean, again, science. And I'm not a scientist, but yet I had all of this knowledge about things that I was trying to understand. So out of that came something that I have created called the equation of life and abundant happiness. And specifically, what it is a framework that uses mathematical symbols to organize and balance your life. And as weird as it sounds, it actually makes perfect sense. And it's because it's how we're supposed to live our lives if we weren't being deceived by the world that we live in. Let me say this. There is so much love on the other side. It is so incredible, so beautiful, and something that we should not be afraid of. I know many people that watch NDEs are at death's door and they're trying to figure out where am I going. So I want those people to know that you're going to go to sleep and you're going to wake up someplace else. And that someplace else looks very much like where you're at right now. The only difference is the people that are there don't have physical bodies. They have different kinds of bodies, their spirits, their energy. So when you die, you're going to have a beautiful experience. You're going to meet your loved ones. You're going to meet your light family, which can be different from your biological family because we actually have two kinds of DNA. We have light DNA in our body cut from the same source. We're all cut from that same source of light. Then we also get DNA in our physical bodies when we actually get a body and it's just a rental unit. Like, I know it's kind of funny. Most people think I live here and this is home and heaven is where I go. Well, it's actually the other way around. Heaven is actually home and earth is a temporary place that souls come to learn and expand because that's why we get a body. The body is the input mechanism for the soul because without the body, you can't feel anything. So imagine trying to learn and learn about life and overcoming things when you have no feelings and a body that will teach you hot and cold. Like it's impossible. So that's why it's really important when you're here to take care of that body because you only get one in this lifetime. So, and it needs to last. So you want to take good care of your body. Okay? That's really, really critical. So for me, Alex, I went through life review and life review is very different from what I thought. Like, I was raised Mormon, so I was expecting to be judged. And because I was absorbing darkness and had been participating in darkness, I expected to be going to hell. That's what I was raised. And I certainly lived my life in fear because not only had I been abused, but I was also making choices in my life that could have been better is all I'll say. Like darkness attracts dark and I would be lying if I didn't say that I didn't dabble in the dark. But what I would also say is that you learn that the darkness in life is actually the teachers of life because you can't know happiness unless you felt sad. You can't you can't you can't appreciate happiness unless you know sad. So they're there by definition. By definition, they have to be there to help us understand the reality that we live in. But but there's also some messaging around all of that that's wrong. So for example, when we think on the other side that we all come here with a purpose. Every life that we have, okay, has a purpose. Now, I was raised in the Christian faith, so we only had one. We only had one life, and we better get it right because if we didn't get it right, we're going to hell. That's how I was raised. When I got to the other side, I didn't experience any of that hell. I didn't experience any of the hate. Did I experience negative? Yes, sir, I did. And I experienced that in my life review. So the way that life review worked for me was that I experienced everything from the perspective of the other people that were there. So I could literally stand with God because that's who was standing with me and then God just kind of like shows you it's like everything suddenly turns 3D and you're in your life and everything about your life is known. Everything that you did that was great and everything that you did was bad. And the thing that's really cool is kind of like interactive in a way, in that time and moments are organized in heaven in these little things that are like bubbles. And the best way to describe it is that a bubble has every timeline in the history of mankind and the world in that bubble. So you can literally see how everything pointed to that single moment in time. And then you can go into that moment of time, and then you get to experience what actually happened. So the good thing is when you experience life review is that you know what you did well because you got to feel the goodness in the hearts of the other people of when you created that goodness. Conversely, if you sowed negative energy into the world and you hurt somebody, then you're going to feel the negative energy in the hearts and the sadness and the sorrow in the people that you hurt. So that part is not fun. That part sucks. And that part is your wake-up call that you have to do better. And we can do better. So life review is about understanding what you did in this life. Because I also learned that reincarnation is real and we have more than one opportunity to perfect our soul. Like that's how it works. You're going to come back many times and experience many things so that your soul can experience the same thing as everybody else's. Why? Because God is equal. God makes it the same for everybody. Like, did you ever wonder how somebody could be fabulously wealthy and then I'm not? And how is that fair? Or how come that house down there has air conditioning and running water and I only have food? How is that fair? And I live in the same village. So you end up making comparisons to others, which is not a good thing to do. But ultimately, what I learned is that everybody gets an opportunity to experience every facet of life. So that means that in some lives, I'm going to be wealthy, and in other lives, I'm not. Everybody gets to experience everything that's available to us here. And the whole idea, the whole reason for everything is to return back. It's to return home to the thing that created us, that infinite light that we're all cut from. We're all cut from that same energy. So life is about the expansion and the evolution of our own individual soul as it also relates to the expansion of all of us collectively. You hear people talk about universal consciousness. That is, in fact, correct. We are all related. We are all connected. God showed me that. We are all connected by light and sound. So that's literally how our Creator keeps track of everything we've ever done and everything we've ever said, because we're just beings of light, and the recording of that is the reflection of that light as perceived by the original source that created that light. You see how it works? So that's why it's important that when you say things into the world, you got to understand that the words you carry last forever. And even though I can't hear it, the universe can, God can, and you can't take it back. Once you put negative energy in the form of voice, that will continue forever. It never goes away. And God showed me that. So, how is it then that you pass go? Like that's what most people want to know is how do I how do I get to heaven? Well, the first thing is don't make the mistake like I did of thinking that heaven is a destination and that I'm going to get there someday when I die. That's a big mistake. Don't do that. What you want to do is bring heaven to earth today. And you can do that by living a life of goodness. And what I mean by that is living with the light from the original source in your heart in such a way that you know right from wrong and you experience the fullness that God has to offer for every one of us. Like again, agnostic and then dying and then meeting God and then feeling the love that God has and then the understanding. Like so many of the things that I had been taught weren't accurate. And so many things that are canonized today in the scriptures that we all read and hold up as the word of God, sadly, hate to say it, but a lot of it just isn't true. A lot of it has been corrupted and messed up by the hearts of man. And man took what was originally brought here as truth, corrupted it, and made it all about control, fear, and power. Because that's not what God created. What's interesting, Alex, is when you're on the other side, I'm grateful. I'm a curious guy. I'm curious in life, and I was curious on the other side, which is why I feel like God really did take the time to show me everything because there's just not much that I don't understand or how it works. So, for example, I learned that in the beginning, which technically doesn't exist, it exists for us because we use the word beginning. But on the other side, there is no beginning, there is no end. It just is, which is hard for people to understand. But you have to understand that that's literally the difference between heaven and where we're at. So I can live a life of goodness and I can bring the light that exists on the other side into my life today. How do I do that? How do I get the light that exists on the other side in my heart today? Because I lived most of my life without any light, not the kind of light that I carry with me today. So I knew that God had a special plan for me. I knew that after I went through life review and I realized the good things that I did and the bad things that I did, I also knew that I, and God shared this with me, that I still had more to do. I know that I drowned in that pool so that I could be healed. I know that because when I came out of the pool, I was not the same person. So I know that part of my healing came from drowning in the pool. And when I came out of the pool, that first ailment that has always bothered me, DID, that was gone. Now, I still had severe ADHD. I was still complex PTSD and still bipolar. So I still had those things, but the DID was gone. So, over the course of 2 years, I was able to pull information from this deposit that was put in my brain. And out of it came what I wrote called The Equation of Life and Abundant Happiness. And it basically uses math. And I know that sounds strange to say, but it's literally Alex math is what holds the cosmos in perfect balance. It's math because you got to know math to understand how things circle around the sun. You have to use math to know how to get to the moon. Like that's all math. So, what if math, which governs physical matter in the cosmos, could also be used to govern matter here? Because human emotion is physical matter. So therefore, it's governed by the same exact properties. And that's what God showed me. So, how does it work? Well, we all learn it as little kids. Even in Europe, here in America, we all learned basic math skills when we went into kindergarten. And we learned things like addition and subtraction. And then we learned multiplication and division. So the equation of life and abundant happiness uses those four operators plus one more. And the way that it works, it goes like this. We add those things in life that brings forth goodness and joy. So we adapt, we add, that's addition. The next principle is subtraction. And what God expects us to do is to let go of those things that don't serve us, that don't bring us joy, and achieve balance. That's what God expects us to do. We have to add what we need, subtract what we don't, and we have to balance in 360 degrees. Not this. Okay. You want to make a perfect life, you have to learn to balance every aspect of your life, which you can easily do when you learn how to master the present moment, which is awareness training. Okay. That's a big mistake most people make in life, and I was one of them. I was never present. I was always thinking about the ugly things from my past that I couldn't fix, or obsessed with my future that I was trying to create that I also didn't have control over. But what I was missing was the magic of life right in front of me. And it was painted full of depression and misery and mental health issues. And that was my life. And a box, 7 boxes of prescription pills. That's how I managed until I drowned in the pool and I learned how to heal myself. So we add and subtract. What's next? Multiplication. And what God expects us to do is to take our balanced effort, achieve a state of what I call neutral, because that's what God is. God is perfectly neutral. And what I mean by that is when you live in neutral, you're not encumbered by anything. I can go left if I need to go left. I can go right if I need to go right. I can go up. I can go down. So is it not the perfect state of freedom? It is. It's perfect freedom. So that's ultimately what you become when you master the equation. So I take my balanced action and my intention, I align it with God, and I engage multiplication, which is the power of expansion and the power of growing something. So now I've taken my action, I've co created something good in the name of love, because you always have to solve every problem in life through the lens of love. And if you do that correctly, you can't make a bad decision. And that's also very, very true. So I had $100. I balanced, I put action and intention. I told God what I was going to do, and God helped me, and it grew. So now I've got $1,000, Alex, which is great. But God showed me that we don't stop with that $1,000 because we have to apply something called abundance. And abundance is how we're supposed to live on this planet Earth. And that's how it was originally set up. But we moved into greed, and we moved into fear, and we moved into false things to control the hearts of men. That's what we did. Man did that. Man is the enemy to God. The natural man is the enemy to God. That is ego. Ego, ego, ego is what separates you from your creator. So the most important thing you can do in this life is let go of your ego, because it's the one thing that keeps you from becoming one with your creator. And that's also incredibly true. So for me, I had to take the principle of abundance and understand that sometimes in life we need a little bit more to feel safe. So what God is saying is, look, Thayne, you got $1,000. How much do you need? Well, God, I need $600. Well, that means there's 400 left over. Okay, but here's the thing, God. I also know that sometimes life just happens and I want to feel safe. And so God's fine with that. He's fine with the price that you set from your heart, because your heart will tell you what is in a reasonable amount of money above and beyond what I actually need. That is your abundance right there. And anything above that is excess. So in that example, if I needed $600 and I add another $100 to it, that means I'm taking 700 of this 1,000, and the other 300, God's telling me to put it back in the system. That's what we're supposed to do. Put it back, give it away, donate it, put it back where it came from. And when you do that, the system will operate perfectly. But we don't do that anymore. We have our first trillionaires in the world. Yet we also have people in Africa that have no running water. So we're not doing it right. And I'm not saying that you can't be wealthy or that you're a bad person if you are wealthy. What you do have, however, is a responsibility for that wealth. That is true. So add, subtract, multiply. The next operator is division. And division is what God showed me is how we equalize the distribution of goodness. So I've got that extra $700 now, or I'm sorry, that extra $300. Who do I divide it with? Oh, well, I'll give a little bit to this person because they're struggling this month, and I'll give this to my brother because I know he's struggling, and I'll give this one to the homeless shelter because I don't need this money. That's what we're supposed to be doing, but we're not doing it. Division is about sharing, and it's also about sharing burdens. So maybe we've had some negative things that have happened in our lives. Well, division is the thing that's going to allow us to share the burden with other people so that we can stand back up again. So add, subtract, multiply, divide. The four operators of math you see can be applied perfectly to your life and your emotions. Then there's one, the greatest of all, Alex, and that's the equal sign. And the equal sign is gratitude. And gratitude is in my opinion, more important than love. Here's why. Love is the power of everything in existence. That is true. And it exists permanently. Love is always present should we choose to operate in it. So, love is an abundant supply, it's never ending. Should we choose to connect to it? Make sense? So, living an abundantly happy life is learning to live in neutral, accepting the fact that the negative things that happened in our lives were there to simply teach us. You see, my whole life, Alex, I was a victim. I showed up as a victim. I was generally angry outside of my friends and family who I was kind to. Anybody else that crossed my path that was rude or insensitive to me, you were going to be scorched earth by the time I was done with you. And I'm not proud of that behavior. But I was also angry and mad inside because nobody knew what happened to me. Nobody understood. And that anger is what, and that victim perspective is what clouded most of my life. But I can tell you today that I walk in the light. I walk in the light of the love that exists. And the way that you get to that love is with gratitude, because gratitude is the spark and the fuel for love. It really is. And I learned with gratitude the most unique way to heal. Most people, when we talk about mental health, okay, the standard solution is to go to your doctor and they're going to give you a prescription. That is what the medical community does today. And I'm not saying that some people don't need medication. There are people who do need medication, and I was one of them, but I only needed it for a brief period of time. I should have never been given the extensive medication that I was given throughout my life because I was never able to heal. When you're strung out on all of these antidepressants and all these antipsychotics and all of these very powerful drugs, you can't heal, and you just can't. And so in my case, having worked with many therapists, I went off of the medication because I was getting tardive dyskinesia and I was starting to get leg shaking, and all of which is not acceptable to me. I'm not okay with any of that. And those drugs, you can't call that an acceptable side effect. It isn't. Looking at a human being that's up there talking to you while their face is moving on their own and they have saliva dripping out of their mouth, no, that is not okay. And that is not an okay symptom that you can give to somebody and say that it's acceptable. That's what big pharma wants us to believe. But there's another way to heal. So how do you heal? It's with gratitude. Okay? Now I know this is strange and I get that. But I'm not talking gratitude like it's ever been taught before. Okay. And here's what I mean. Gratitude, most people, and I tried this, wrote a list of things I'm thankful for, and that helped me. But I didn't stick with it. And then pretty soon I fell off the gratitude. So then I tried an app and I downloaded an app that made me do a gratitude journal. And in just a number of days, I quit on that because it was irritating. Then one day, God had a different plan for me. And I actually met somebody in a random situation that did something for me that changed my life. It was something random, something that meant nothing to her, but meant significantly to me. So, in this interaction that I had with this person, Alex, I decided to pour my heart into this individual in a way that I've never done before. So, I used her name and I said, "Hey, Carla, I know that you're standing at the front register at this Carl's Jr. And when I came up to the side door, you could tell I was very stressed out and I wasn't able to get in the side door. And then you motioned for me to come in the front door. And as I was walking in, you gave me the code. And I didn't know that I needed that code, but that was the code to the bathroom, which is where I needed to go more than anything. So, out of the kindness of your heart, you helped me and you gave me the code before I bought anything, before as a customer. You didn't have to do that, but you chose to do that. That's the kindness of your heart. So, Carla, I owe you a great deal of gratitude. I need to thank you for showing up in my life today because there's some things about me that you don't know. And one of those is that sadly enough, I was abused and traumatized as a child. And one of the things that I was traumatized and abused for, not by my family, but by people I went to church with, was I once wet my pants as a little boy because I was being abused by an adult. And I thought if I wet my pants, it would make them not want to hurt me. But instead, they just abused me more. So it created a very negative relationship with something as simple as wetting your pants. So that day when I walked into the Carl's Jr., I almost wet my pants. Had I wet my pants, I would have disassociated. I would have lost my shit, for lack of a better word. It would not have ended well. But instead, this kind woman took time to help me. So I said to her, "Hey, I know you think you're just selling burgers, but you're not. You're touching people's lives, and you touched my life today. And I want to thank you." So I grabbed my wallet and I carry $100 bill in my wallet. And I knew that I didn't need that $100 bill, but something told me that Carla probably did. So I said to her, I said, "Carla, I'm going to give you this $100 on a couple of conditions. The first condition is if you need this money, I want you to spend it on you. Are you good with that?" She shook her head. "Okay, but if you don't need the money, then I would ask that you give this $100 to the next person in line that can't buy a meal." And something tells me that that beautiful heart of yours, you're going to make that decision automatically. So at that, I let go of the bill. And literally, both her and I began weeping. Now, why? Because something happened, Alex. Something happened in this interchange with a stranger. And I got something that I call a gratitude cocktail. And it's literally something revolutionary and it's going to be studied clinically um, in professional environments because I've learned something about how to rewrite the human subconscious mind. And I learned how to do it using gratitude and unconditional love and the source of change, which is actually neuroscience. Because gratitude is neuroscience. Gratitude silences the amygdala and it increases activity in the prefrontal cortex. So the minute you use gratitude, you're giving yourself a boost of goodness. but we don't use it enough and we don't share it in the authentic way that God wants us to share gratitude. Because when we share gratitude with people that we don't know, you're going to get a healing cocktail that's going to change who you are. And that's what happened to me. And I learned how to manipulate my body specifically so that I can get this cocktail every single time. I can give myself a boost of dopamine, oxytocin, vasopressin, and other neuromodulators, and it's gonna set off a tingling feeling in my whole body. But here's the most important part. It's going to start the neuroplasticity in my brain, and it's going to form a positive experience from that interaction. So, what I learned, Alex, is that using this protocol, which I now teach, okay, I now teach this, and you can heal yourself from depression. You can heal yourself from ugly things that happen to you. You can heal yourself from panic and anxiety. All of it can be done through gratitude. I know that's crazy, and I know people don't believe me, but I'm living proof of it. I do not have any mental conditions today. I am completely healed. And my psychologist, psychiatrist would sign off on all of that. The only risk I have is if I was ever traumatized in the same way I was traumatized as a kid, that could bring the DID back. But most likely, I can tell you right now that it's never going to happen. Not a chance in hell. No way. So I now have a very different life. Since this time, I've now taught others. And I taught another man very close to me, somebody that I knew that was also severely abused with DID, paranoid schizophrenia, bipolar, ADHD, somebody with that was a self-mutilator, all of those things. And he was on the system his entire life, but not today because I taught him the equation of life and abundant happiness and a specific technique that is rooted in neuroscience. Gratitude is neuroscience. Gratitude can heal you. And it healed that friend of mine because he no longer has any of these things. And he's been on the system almost 35 years of his life. Today, he takes nothing. He has his first job and he got a girlfriend. How amazing is that? And he was on the system collecting a disability check for over 30 years. Okay, so I changed me, I changed him, and then I thought, well, maybe we're an anomaly because we were both severely abused. What happens if somebody that has not been abused learns this technique? What do they get? Well, what they get is to shed every self-limiting belief that they have. Why? Because self-limiting beliefs are shadows and they come from our childhood. And when we experience things as a child that are negative, we write a story about what happened. The problem is our brains aren't developed enough to write the correct story. So oftentimes as children, the stories that we wrote that we carry into adulthood are the wrong story. And we also didn't understand long-term decision making and rationalizing. Our brains couldn't do that when we were children. They weren't designed to do that. So you see, every human being walks around with shadows in their heart, shadows that keep them from showing up as their true self. The shadow is the voice that says, I'm not good enough. I'm too fat. Nobody loves me. I'll never be like that guy. I'm always going to be a loser. Those are thoughts that come from your subconscious mind that you programmed. That's true. We are what we think. So if you're putting away negative thought in your brain and you're absorbing negative thought, your brain is going to automate negative and it's going to make your present negative and it's going to make your future negative. So the only way, the best way to rewrite your subconscious mind and change who you are is with neuroscience. That's how you do it. And you do it by leaning into gratitude and you do it by learning the equation of life and abundant happiness, which is what I teach. So, where can you find out about it? Understand something, Alex. When I came back from the pool, and I got my life back and I healed myself, I could have easily gone back into corporate America and done what I've always done. But I didn't want to do that. I've spent the last 2 years unpacking my near-death experience and about $250,000 creating a course and a way to teach this to people because I think everybody deserves to be abundantly happy in life, and it shouldn't cost a fortune and pills to have that. Because that's true. You don't need pills to be happy. You didn't take pills to become depressed. Why do you think you have to take pills to not be depressed? It was thought alone that screwed you over, and it is thought alone that can unscrew you. Incredibly accurate. And I did not used to believe that, but I know for my own personal belief that you can heal from within when you take the light that comes from up there and you put it in your heart. Because ultimately, that's what happens when you learn this technique that I teach. You're going to have the light from up above in your heart, and that light becomes your compass and you know right from wrong and you have amazing intuition that can guide you the rest of your life. I don't lead my life with my brain today. My cognitive skills mean nothing. Everything I do in my life comes from my heart, and I get direction all day long from God where He wants me to be, what I need to be doing, and who I need to see. So that's kind of my story.
Thank you very much. How can people find more about you?
Best place is come to my website, and it's purelove.com. So ITSPURELOVE.com. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. My name is Thayne, Thayne. Last name is Martin. So you can find me. Facebook, I show up with my first name, which is actually David, but you'll see me and you'll know who that's me. So I have a public profile on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. All of my 250 plus podcast episodes, which I did on Instagram, are on my website. You can learn about the equation of life and abundant happiness on my website. There's YouTube videos when I closed my 365 days of sunshine and gratitude. All of that's on my website. So you can submit a form and then I could interact with you and then ultimately send me an email. My phone number's out there if you want to reach me and you want to take the course. I want to share this, Alex. I work on abundance. And what I mean by that is I have a suggested price for this course and what it takes me to do this because you can't do this for free. It takes money, a lot of money. So to expect people to do it for free is an unrealistic expectation. The second thing is this is shadow work, and unless you've got skin in the game, you're not going to do it. Because I've worked for free before, and free does not work. Because when it gets difficult, people that have no skin in the game will quit. And that's a waste of my time and their time. So I work what's on abundance. And what I mean by that is I'll tell you, we'll hop on a call. I'll tell you what this course is worth and what you should pay. But at the end of the day, I didn't do this and I don't do this for money. I do it to help people so they can heal just like I healed. I don't heal them. They will heal themselves from the protocol that I can teach them. That's what actually happens. So when you sign up with me, you're going to spend time learning 101 experiential exercises. That's how I teach. So it's not book learning. You're gonna sit with me for about 9 hours. We break it up over a couple of evenings, and I'm going to teach you the equation of life and abundant happiness and 20 principles that God also shared with me that you need to know to manage your life with perfection. So I share those as a digital deck of cards that go in your phone. Then I give you 101 exercises that are designed to teach you awareness, emotional intelligence, alertness, to teach you how to balance, add, subtract, multiply, divide, all of the things that you need in order to open up your heart. Ultimately, that is what is going to heal you. You're going to heal yourself with these exercises because you're going to be working with friends, family, and the public. But all of them are rooted in gratitude, unconditional love, and kindness. So it's actually a lot of fun, but you're going to get a little vulnerable. You're going to get a little bit vulnerable, but if you get vulnerable, you're going to find the peace that you're looking for because this light is going to turn on right here. And once this turns on, you'll never lose it. Never, ever, ever, ever. So that's kind of how I live my life today. And I work on abundance. So abundance means that you and I will agree to a price. And let's say that you come back to me, Alex, and you say, you know what, Thayne, I can't pay what you're looking for this, but I can give you 2,000. I've got $2,000 to take this course. Then I would say, okay, let's make it 2,500 because there should be some skin in the game here. There has to be skin in the game because if it gets tough, I don't want you quitting on me. All right, so that is my opening abundant price. 90 days later, when we finish this course and you have the life that you've always dreamed of, I give you the opportunity to revisit your price. So if you think I haven't done my job, then you can let me know and you and I will negotiate a discount and I'll give you money back. And that is exactly how I roll. Hasn't happened yet, but I will tell you that most people they bevy back up because they realize the light that they now have is far greater than they ever thought they would ever achieve. So most people that I work with end up paying me more money at the end and they give it to me as a donation because that's what I'm doing. I'm working not for profit. I'm working to help people and my end game is a nonprofit. I have a nonprofit already formed. It's a 501(c) and it is sitting there with a board of directors waiting to be funded. So I'm already ready for it. I just have some other things that have to come first with this business before I can make that happen. So that's my end game. I'm not doing this to make money. I'm grateful for the life that I have. I'm grateful for the love that I know that comes from on high. I'm grateful that I understand how life works and that I get an opportunity to come back and to share my love with the world. I'm eternally grateful for sure.